Okay, today we're going to look at rubrics. What is a rubric? How do we use it? And we're going to pretend like you've never seen a rubric before, you've never used it, you have no idea what it is. Rubrics are something that teachers use or that people use in grading pretty much any kind of project or writing to give it a score. It doesn't necessarily have to be for a grade. I actually used a rubric like this when I was hiring people for a job when I worked for OU. So rubrics are really kind of useful. They allow you to look at things kind of objectively and put it all down on paper and put it in perspective. So let's get started. Let's look at this rubric, for example. So this is a rubric that's written actually for kids to use. So the first thing I do when I'm grading a paper is I'm going to read it through at least twice before I do anything. I'm not going to give it any kind of grade or make any kind of judgment about anything until I've read it through twice. And then I'm going to go through and you'll see on a rubric, it's a grid. And here at the top we've got focus, content, organization, style, conventions. These could be titled different things. They could be different categories. Instead of conventions, somebody could put grammar. Or instead of content, they could say themes. Or it's whatever you want the category to be. Then here on the side, we have numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Same thing here. You can have 3 levels. You can have 6 levels. However many levels you feel is appropriate. 4 is a really good place to start. And then it's got descriptions here. Basic. So the very, very basic that we would accept would be a 2. Proficient. This is what it's going to be on your OCCT test. So this is similar terminology. This would be limited knowledge. This would be unsatisfactory on the OCCT test. So that's why it's good to use a 4-step for us, because that's what they're going to use on the OCCT test. They're going to use unsatisfactory, satisfactory, proficient. Unsatisfactory, limited knowledge, proficient, and advanced. So in each of these categories, I have a description. So let's look over here in conventions on below basic. Many sentences are awkward or are fragments. There are many grammar, usage, spelling, and punctuation errors. The errors make the narrative very difficult to read. If you have a 2-paragraph essay that only has 2 sentences, you're probably going to end up here in number 1 on conventions, because that means you've got 2 huge, long, run-on sentences that are going to make it incredibly difficult to read. If you didn't use any kind of spell check, if you didn't have somebody else look over it, if you didn't use a dictionary, if you didn't use the spell check in Word, and everything's spelled wrong, you're probably going to end up over here. Go up here to 2. You do not use a variety of sentence structures, and some sentences may be fragments. There are many errors in grammar, usage, spelling, and punctuation. How do I know it's going to be a level 2? Well, I'm going to sit and think, did I struggle really hard to read this writing? If I did, it's probably going to be in 1. If I didn't struggle really hard to get the meaning of what you were writing, but it was still pretty full of errors, you're going to be here in a 2. To a 4, you used a lot of different kinds of sentences. You had maybe 1 or 2 grammatical errors or spelling errors, and I can read it perfectly with no issues. If you do that, you're going to get a 4. Same thing with organization. So we'll go down here. The events might not be in the correct order. Makes it hard to understand. You don't have an introductory paragraph and you don't have a concluding paragraph. Okay? Or your introductory paragraph is just, I'm going to tell you a story about a frog. Okay? It needs to be a paragraph. There needs to be more. It has to be complete. If we go up here to 4, your narrative has a clear beginning, middle, end. You use transition words properly. You have complete introductory paragraph and a complete conclusion. So A rubric is really great because you, as the author, if you sit down and you think really hard and you're very honest with yourself, you will know your grade before you ever hand in your paper. If you are very honest and you say, you know what, I have a lot of spelling mistakes, I know I'm going to get a 2, then you can probably bet that I'm going to give you a 2 in the same thing. I love rubrics because it allows you as the writer to self-grade and to self-reflect and see if you've done the absolute best that you can do. Your goal every time, of course, is going to be an advanced in all of these areas. Then down here, you got your total score. So what you could do when you're using your rubric is you go through and you circle where the writer scored in all of those different categories. So if I have somebody that didn't do very well in their essay, they had lots of errors, they didn't have all their paragraphs, their story wasn't clear, it was just kind of silly, and they got 1s all across the board, then their score would be a 5 out of 20. Okay? And then if we're having the assignment worth 100 points, so we just multiply that, and they've only got a 25% on that. So it's really easy to grade. It's really easy to use to know where you're at, to know what grade you're going to get. This is one example. Let me go over into my Google Drive and I'll show you some different examples. Okay, so here in my Google Drive in my shared writing folder, there's a folder called Rubrics. So I can click on this. Here's another sample rubric that we might use. So this one is used for narrative writing. And you'll see here we've got below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced. This one breaks it down even further, 1, 2, and 3. So you could get a 3 in below basic. So it's not totally horrible, but it's still not really acceptable. And it's got more categories over here. Voice, word and language choice, sentence fluency. That's a different sample. Here's another one. This one has 6 categories. Below standards, 1, 2, and 3. 4 is going to be meet standards. 5 exceeds, 6 exceeds. It's also over here. And language conventions only got 4. So you can break a rubric down in many different ways. Zoom in a little bit closer. So in ideas and content, in order to get a 6, stays on the topic, you don't ramble or repeat, includes the main idea with 4 or more well-developed supporting details, and includes depth of information and exceptionally supporting details that are fully developed. So this one is going to be you went above and beyond, and you have a very, very well-developed paper. There's also a website you can look at if you want to that's a rubric generator. There's a set of rubrics here. So we'll go to the 7th grade Argumentative and open it up in just a second. Again, this is just a sample, just something for you to use. This one has check boxes. Okay, did you effectively do this? Did you effectively introduce the claim? Did you clearly acknowledge the alternate or opposing claim? This is in the argumentative paper, that's why that's talking about that. If you can check all of those boxes, then you got a 4 in statement and purpose of focus. And then you would go through at the end and calculate the score and give the grade. So again, this is an introduction to rubrics. In your tools folder for 6th grade or your tools for 7th grade is a folder entitled Rubrics, and that's where you'll find this information so that you can go on and look at the sample rubrics. And any project that we do in our writing class this year that has a rubric, I will provide to you before you ever start writing, so you can use it as a guide to self-assess and to grade yourself as you go along. So you will have a very, very good idea before you you ever get your paper back from me, what your grade will be. So rubrics are a great tool to use for self-assessment and for monitoring your writing as you go along.